What's up, everybody? Today on the Yours Truly podcast, we have a very special guest joining us in the virtual studio. For the first time, Will Preble popped onto my radar was through a comment he made on my second podcast conversation with Jordan Hall. He referenced Jordan's use of AI to converse with historical theologians' literary ideas from the past as an insightful perspective on the potential of AI workflows in theology and education. From what I've gathered, Will is deeply immersed in the intersection of technology and human potential, with his mantra of ascendance. He is on a mission to guide brands and leaders toward a future where technology amplifies our innate power, creating not just growth, but an explosion of possibilities. A particular piece of Will's bio on his YouTube channel struck me. His mention of spiritual ascendance, which he views as a crucial aspect of entering the AI era. As he puts it, there are many levels to this, but for me, this is grounded and oriented in the teachings of Yeshua. In his studio, Ascendance, Will orchestrates a symphony of branding, business innovation, and AI development, all aimed at shaping a more beautiful and abundant future for humanity. Today, we have the privilege of delving into Will's journey, his insights, and his vision for the future, where technology and humanity are in a more harmonious partnership. I can't wait to explore the depths of his ideas and experience as we practice some conversation craft here today. So, without further delay, let's welcome Will Preble to the Yours Truly podcast. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. Well, what's up today?
What's up, Christian? Happy to be here.
Thanks. Yeah, man. So this all came about due to just you commenting. I've tried to see if there were other ways that you intersected with, with my content and then on YouTube or Twitter. And I didn't see a whole lot of overlap. So I was kind of interested with start like how you found me and why this made sense to meet and talk.
Yeah, I think it really kind of came down to your conversations with Jordan Hall. I've been following Jordan for a while and just been in his sphere. And recently had been super interested by his conversion to Christianity. And you guys talked a little bit about his faith and a number of other topics. But I don't remember exactly how I found your content on X, but I think I found you on X and then I came over to YouTube and specifically from that conversation and seemed really thoughtful. Seemed like you were really sitting with some deep and important issues across disciplines, which is something I like to do as well. So yeah, just resonated.
Yeah. So I think for me, one of the pieces I've been thinking about is I've been kind of like unpacking my story for myself and for people connecting in this conversation. One of the aspects hasn't been my fascination, my connection to technology, actually. It's been mainly aimed at personal development, my Christian faith, and the big players of rebuilding meaning in my life, from the meaning crisis like Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Peugeot, John Vervaeke, and the community that's actually centered around the figure of Paul Vanderklay. People talk about this little corner of the internet. There's like kind of a subculture community that people use YouTube very much like people would use something like Instagram or Facebook, but it's very personal. It's highly personalized. So I don't know if you knew anything about that, but my connection to technology, I think, is why also I've been so fascinated with the Jordan Hall story. His background was just, there's a lot of crossover, because it's interesting you mentioned the crossover between video games, technology, imagination, sci-fi, that are all converging. So on that, I was wanting to kind of hear from you, what makes Will Preble, what's your story like, as far and as deep as you want to go into that kind of, childhood on. So
Yeah, I'll try to keep it succinct but still meaty. And I will say I've been pretty, not actively involved, but passively impacted by Jonathan Peugeot and Peterson and that circle. I'm not aware of Paul Vanderklay, although the name sounds familiar. So, sounds like another exciting rabbit hole to go down. So that's awesome. But I've loved the community that's popping up around Peugeot and kind of this reintroduction to Christianity and meaning making. I would say kind of those two components, like how do we discern and create meaning in the world, and then also the reemergence of Christianity outside of some of the sources that we were previously getting it from, where I think a lot of people just got turned off, not trying to pass judgment on any church or anyone in particular, but there's just kind of this falling away and then reconnecting with the sphere of Christianity that seems to be blowing up right now, especially from people in those spheres. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about that later. But to get into my story and why I'm doing what I'm doing, I mean, first I will say the brand Ascendance, which is the studio that I run right now. The idea of Ascendance kind of came to me seeing and experiencing this sense of dissonance in the world in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, where I was working in tech. I got a job in machine learning and data science, a little bit of both at the third biggest company in the country, a healthcare company. And it was really cool to just see all of these emerging technologies and things that were being developed and moving so fast. But it also seemed very like hollow and disconnected from. It was like I was at a company that was supposed to be serving humans, and we were totally disconnected and abstracted away from even knowing what a human was. We just, we're seeing the numbers and the code. And so I was like, there's this dehumanizing effect that technology has created, as well, probably in combination with some other factors. And I'm entrepreneurial, and I've been an entrepreneur for 5 years, and I love creating things and building things, and business is a big component of that. But I'm also someone who has tried to seek truth on every level in my journey in different ways, and my spiritual journey is very important to me as well. And that was another area that I felt kind of a disconnect around, was like we have business and kind of life over here, and we have church, if you're in the church, or your spiritual path or walk or whatever over here, and they're oftentimes very disconnected, kind of the material and the spiritual. And so the idea of Ascendance for me was, it's not just, we can't just grow anymore, especially in the AI age when things are going to be shifted so rapidly. We have to redefine what growth is from a business perspective, but also integrate growth, like individual spiritual growth and our material business, what have you growth. And so that's kind of the idea of Ascendance, is like, well, how do we do that? How do we do that in a meaningful way, especially for me focusing on the space of emerging technology? And because I think that we really need to figure out how to align our technologies with human potential in a way that we don't have a situation in 10 years where we're all using all of these AI models and personal AI assistants and such, and they're on the back end, they're selling advertising dollars to push me towards this product so that OpenAI or Microsoft or whoever it is can make some money. Or it's like we make more and more powerful technology, and then we weaponize that technology against the people that are using it. And I don't think that's having advertising business models is always evil, but it's something that we didn't do super well in the past 20, 30 years of the internet. And it's something that we need to do well in the future. And I think that conversation is not just a business conversation. It's a holistic conversation that encompasses all aspects of our lives, including the spiritual. And so I'll bounce back a little bit to my teens and kind of formative years. I grew up in the church, and I have always had this sense of a connection with God, and always this. I've always had this experience that like it doesn't make sense in my mind for there not to be a God, both from the ways that I've personally been impacted by God, and just like logically, it takes more faith for me to believe there is nothing than to believe there is a God. And so I've always had some sense of faith, but I got very disillusioned again, just coming back to the theme of dissonance. I got very disillusioned with the American kind of charismatic Christian churches that I was around and involved in my teens, and I went to Christian schools and such as well. And so I was surrounded by all this Christian stuff, and a lot of it didn't feel very connected to the Spirit of God, at least is how I understood God at that time. And it also felt very disconnected from like operating how I thought Christ would probably operate if he were alive in culture today, which he is through us, but to look at his example. And so I spent my early 20s not involved in the church, not formally really identifying as a Christian, but always kind of came back to the Bible as like my main source of truth. I was open to there being other truth that superseded it, but I never found anything. And I explored the Eastern religions. I did yoga trainings. I did a lot of different stuff to just kind of experience different things. And I always came back to Christ and the Bible as something that felt like the deepest truth. There was nothing that seemed to be more true or point me in the right direction more than coming back to Christ. And so once I realized that was going to keep happening and that wasn't going to change a couple of years ago, I started to get more serious about my faith. And as I got more serious about my faith, that was about the time when I was working in kind of a digital marketing space and in entertainment, nightlife, music industry stuff, and realized I was around a lot of spaces that I didn't really align with personally and weren't really great for my soul. And I also felt this calling to take what I was getting in my spiritual walk and bring it into the space of emerging technology and AI. And I had the experience and kind of the career trajectory where that made sense. And so it made sense from an entrepreneurial and a business standpoint, but I also just felt called to be there around some of the technologies that are going to shape our future. As I don't see a ton of leaders that are taking a very integrated approach to how they're building things in this space. And I want to change that. And I want to put my voice out there and help empower and collect other voices who are building technology or leveraging technology to unlock their potential in whatever space that they're in, so that we can start to figure out, what do the technologies of the future look like? What do the technologies of the kingdom of God look like? And just have a less dissonant approach to, how we go about things as we move into the future. So I'm rambling a bit. I'll stop there and pass it over to you.
So yeah, kind of raised, kind of white bread, vanilla Christian, American evangelicalism. Where are you at these days? Like as far as like geography.
I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona, but
Okay.
I grew up in Minneapolis and lived there until last year for 28 years.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, yeah, it sounds like, I mean, people can say that they see that problem about technology, but there really is no path because we've been in this modern scientific path for, well, since it's been going, the last couple hundred years, and people like Jonathan Peugeot having conversations with cognitive scientists, and then even somebody like Jordan having a Christian conversion. Those are people that spent all of his time in the last big tech boom right before social media. Um, do you see those things as like a convergence to help, like, to help you on as a person who's trying to find that path forward? And because I mean, I work in healthcare, and on the other side, like the people take care of people's side, but I know that the behemoth behind it, it's so soulless. I know it. Um, how do you see, what are kind of the practical ways with some of the stuff that you've been picking up from maybe somebody like Jonathan Peugeot or whoever, helping bridge those two worlds?
Yeah. Well, first, just to bounce off one thread I want to pull out.
Yeah.
I definitely felt a lot of soullessness when I was in corporate, but I also don't think it's helpful to demonize the people that are working in these places, as I was one, and I still work with large corporations, and I think that there's a lot of infrastructure there that could do a lot of beautiful things. And so I don't know that, I don't think you were doing this, but I just, to make the point, I think we have to create a space where not just the individual, but the larger entities that, corporations are entities that we have as humans have created to serve us. And sometimes we lose sight of that fact. We start to serve our own creation, which is maybe idolatry. I don't know. But we, there's a lot of beautiful things that large, hyper efficient corporations could do with resources. They're good at managing resources. They're good at getting things done. And personally, in the work that I am starting to do with some larger companies, I think there are a lot of people in these places that want to innovate. They want to change. They want to have regenerative models. And so I just wanted to throw that out there as a, like, I want, I see a lot of like revolutionary perspectives, and I'm all for that. But I think it also needs to be a place where there is space. It's not just cancel culture where it's like tear everything down. It's like we're all humans, and we need to be able to see ourselves in everyone across the board, so that we can all move forward together. So going back to your point on Peugeot, and Hall, and some of these figures who have been really, I think, formative for a lot of people, I would dare to say, or they put out a lot of information and perspectives that have helped a lot of people form more meaning in the world right now, in a time where reality is kind of fracturing and fractal in a lot of ways, and the media landscape has played a part in that, for sure, and the digital media landscape. I encountered Jordan Hall and Daniel Schmachtenberger. Actually, I've never met Jordan. I've met Daniel, and some of those other characters in the Game B type space. Several years ago, as I was just going through a bit of a dark night of the soul, and trying to make meaning again in my life, and figure out how to orient myself, to use some of Peterson's language. And so I think it's been really cool to see someone like Jordan Hall come back to Christianity, not because I'm like, you have to be a Christian, but because I really value his intellect, and I think a lot of other people do too. And so the fact that he's found his way back here, it's not just valid, it's encouraging. I don't want to say validating. I think encouraging is the right word.
Yeah.
Because his perspective has been really helpful for a lot of us who have just been out here, especially younger folks like myself, who have been trying to make sense of things and figure out both how to move forward, what to build, and where we fit in this new story that's emerging. So Peugeot, I would throw in there as well as a different side to it, but has contributed a ton too. So yeah, I don't know if that was your full question, but
Yeah. There's a couple of things I want to try to hold on to. Kind of going back, I mean, you were talking about like corporate entities, and then I know people like Hall and others have discussed the idea of egregore.
yeah,
So it's like, And even like my posture toward that you kind of picked up on, it's like this soulless behemoth. And you're like, I've been on the other side, and I loved that. Like I actually loved you taking it personal, because that's actually, I think it's part of the key, because in this little community, we call it this little quarter of the internet, like around, you said, you didn't know who Paul Vanderklay was. He's like a pastor at a tiny church in Sacramento that he's got like 30,000 subs here on YouTube. And it's a lot of odds and ends of people that are actually like using this digital medium to hone in on the personal. I mean, this is happening partially because of that. This is downstream. This conversation is happening because of that.
Yeah.
So, and even then, so we take this and we talk about like our real world experiences. And now I'll take it one step further to conversation I had with my daughter last night. She got home. They've been doing standardized testing all week. She's 14, and she's very, to invoke like Ian McGilchrist, she's very right brained. Always has been. She lived in like an imaginary world for a very long time, probably longer than, she just could do interesting things with words because of that. And like sitting and looking at a computer and taking a test, she's like, Dad, it's just like killing my soul as I sit there all day to do this. And I know you actually have, I think education's kind of an idea for you that you're maybe optimistic about in the future. But I said, yeah. And it's because it is because like this whole, the way that we've developed civilization up to this point, especially even all these technological innovations, have been driven out of this kind of left brain pursuit, and it dominates everything. And so it's going to be like that. I just was telling her it's going to be like that for a while. But I want you to, as you can, to like hold on to this other part of you, this really superpower that she has, to carry that forward. And it sounds like, that's what you're trying to say. Can we get this relationship better? Because the relationship has been so lopsided. And you see something like, headed toward these structures of meaning, like historical religions, as actually part of the path forward. And yeah, I don't know, but that has been, well, the other side of it, I think. How old are you exactly? Are you officially a millennial or a Gen Z?
I'm a millennial. I'm right on the cusp. I'm 28. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm about 10 years older than you. And I lived through, the exciting times of the social media revolution. And the question really, I think, you are still positioned to be a part of the AI revolution, because that's really the next, there's nothing else. That
Right.
is it. And there's a lot of anxiety around it. You seem to be optimistic. What gives you kind of your optimism about it?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that it's just more helpful. Like it's hard to. I think you can kind of choose your perspective on something, and I think there's logical arguments for pessimism and such, but I just choose the optimistic ones, with the caveat that also grounded in reality, and willing to speak out about the ways that it could go wrong, and the ways that maybe it already is going wrong in some cases. And I think that a lot of that is around kind of the business models and governance structures that we have baked into the fabric of culture today. It's not even as much about the tech, I think, as obviously the tech's important, but like where that tech is birthed, especially AI, because AI is such a reflection of, all technology is a reflection of its creators and environment, to an extent, but AI even more so, because we're literally training these things on our data and reflecting stuff back at us. And so I think getting the environment right is really important. And that's not we want like an easy answer of like, here's the problem, and now here's how we're going to solve it. Doing the work on yourself, and like moving forward on a human level as a leader. That's a lot of it, and that's not a quick fix or a SaaS product that can fix that. There's no enterprise SaaS product that fixes the problem of working on yourself and confronting your own shadow, and like figuring out where you stand with your belief system and how you want to show up for people, and all of that. And so I think that's partially why I'm optimistic, is because I believe, my faith is grounded in Yeshua and Christ. And so that is what gives me hope on the most basic level, is like, I know, he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. Like he already iced the game, like he already won. And so, yes, there's going to be suffering. There's going to be a lot of terrible things that we're going to see in the world, and hopefully not experience the worst of, but some of us will, and that is a reality. We knew that of this world and this life that we live here. But I think coming back to the fact that the ultimate battles on a spiritual level has already been won, and we're already saved there, and so now it's just a matter of like, well, if that's true, then that's anything that I get into, I can be optimistic about, because it's just a matter of like, how do I align myself more with what this would look like in a kingdom perspective, whether that's, being in media, or being in healthcare, or being in emerging technology. It's like, well, how would this look like if it was in the New Jerusalem, right? And then you start moving in that direction. It doesn't mean you're there instantly, but at least you have a direction to move in. So, I mean, that's what makes me optimistic and excited, really, is like, there's so far up to go. Like, there's so much opportunity to do things better on every level of the stack, that it's just a matter of like going out and building it. And it can be discouraging at times to be early to something, or to not have momentum yet. But that's probably the biggest challenge for me, is like, finding other people that are seeing the same thing, and finding people that want to build in this way, because it can be more challenging. It's not the shortcut path, but it is the most fulfilling path. So
I would encourage you, because you said about going back to the part you said, I'd have to check out that rabbit hole of Paul Vanderglay. He released, he had a members only, but he had a conversation with Jordan Hall that was absolutely excellent about his formative years, that I think you would find incredibly fascinating. So I want to be looking out for that as it comes out. The optimistic side, I really appreciated how you framed that, because it was actually encouraging to me. And the other piece is, coming into this conversation, I was thinking about maybe the fact that I kind of think that I'm beginning to think that I have an audience. I don't know. I haven't participated in this way, that hasn't been a thing that I've just been trying to like do this, So it's like, oh, well, and one of the ideas I had from that was, it might be helpful for somebody, especially that has been way more native in this, to describe Web 3.0, and maybe how, if that is crypto, or how those things are connected as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Web3 is essentially the shift to a different tech stack. The internet's shift to a slightly different tech stack. So the Web 2 tech stack is, you have kind of your corporate platform complex, your centralized platforms that kind of own everything, and it's been very privatized. And all of if you're interacting with that corporate platform complex, like all of your data is running through it. It's not really private. It's not really secure. It's not really psychologically safe. Again, lots of beautiful, we're on Web 2. There's lots of beautiful things happening there. So it's not like I don't say, never go to the mall because like you don't like what some of the stores are doing. Like you might meet a cool person at the mall and that's awesome, but you might not vibe with like the values of the company that's running the mall, right? And that's okay. So I think Web3, the simplest way to understand it is just like blockchain is now a technology that can take a lot of the centralized trust out of systems. So like I don't have to rely on Google or Amazon or a bank or a centralized middleman to handle, moving my money or managing my accounts, my identity. We all have a Gmail account. Well, what if that wasn't managed by Google, right? What if they didn't have access, a central player didn't have access to that data? It was just me again, like it was back in the day when we were writing letters, although I guess you had the postal service, but you got to have a network to move things, of course. And so, yeah, I don't know if I'm making this simple now that I'm thinking about it,
I
but
like it. I
think
like
I think the really important thing for me with Web3 that's drawn me into it is, and I'm not doing as much, I am contributing to a few early stage projects in Web3 and one in music. And so my hands are in spaces just because I want to be there. But I would envision, it's not like the bulk of my business per se right now, but I would envision it becoming a bigger part of it in the future. Especially because I think the convergence of AI and Web3 is really important. And the point that I was going to make that keeps coming to mind is that I think governance is the most important component of Web3. The fact that we're now like Web2 platforms, they emerged at the level of infrastructure. So they were infrastructure in the old system. Like you had, if you had a store, now that was a physical store selling some stuff. Now you can have an internet version of that store. But the business model didn't change. It was just like how you just did it on a digital platform instead of at Toys R Us or, to name a defunct store pre-Web 2. But now with Web3, with what you can do with a token model, you can now develop your own governance structures. So if I want to, for example, with Bitcoin being the most obvious Web3 example, and crypto, I guess, more refers to the currency element of it, the finance component of Web3, which is an important part. It's not the whole thing, but it's a component of it. Bitcoin is a decentralized protocol. So no, there's JP Morgan doesn't own Bitcoin. The US government doesn't own Bitcoin. It's distributed. So it's actually owned by the people who use the network, which is what the United States is supposed to be in theory, in principle. It's what, a lot of these systems that got really centralized are supposed to be, but it's actually working that way in a distributed manner where if I'm a user of the network or I'm a miner who's running the algorithms on my hardware to prove the transactions are valid, or I operate a node. There's incentive structures where if I can contribute to making the network viable, I get rewarded. I can use the network and I pay some small fee, probably smaller than dealing with intermediaries typically, like a bank, and unless there's some issues with transaction fees, but that's another conversation. But as the tech improves, it's more cost effective. I'm not giving my control of my assets to an intermediary. My identity can be a component of that, my money, and also the way I run businesses and build communities and such. And so because there's a token incentive that aligns me to want to not just be a user, but like an owner of a network. Now that technology is aligned with me. Like because if I succeed with that technology, I'm going to hold more of it, probably own more of it, be more involved. The network wins. I win as a user, and so there's an alignment there. Whereas like with social media, I don't own any of Instagram. I'm not aligned as a user with the technology of Instagram. And so if Instagram wants to push me towards a certain political viewpoint, for example, which they have done, or if it wants, not even speaking to the politics of it, just the fact that they have done that, or if they want to get me a little bit more addicted to their platform with a feature that's going to take a few more hours of my time. That doesn't have to be aligned with making me the best version of myself, or even providing value to me necessarily. It just has to align with what the owners of that platform want. And so the alignment of a technology and the business structure around that technology with the user, I think, is a really important innovation. And that's not what people talk about as much when they talk about Web3. They talk about crypto and finance and making money and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, unless you're scamming people, of course. But um, there's a really important conversation around governance, and aligning technology with the end user. And the way I foresee that developing with AI is that, we need to have a layer of privacy around, if every single one of us is going to have a super powerful AI assistant like Jarvis from Iron Man, right? We're going to get to the point where we all have those or multiple of those that are helping us run our lives, helping us run our, like, literally running our businesses for us. And it's like, it could be really awesome. But also, I don't want a social media situation where that technology is running on a centralized place and it's just pipelining all of my thoughts into the NSA, or it's in a less kind of nefarious example, it's just its revenue model is based on me spending more money on it or using it more, or whatever it is. That's not 100% aligned with bringing it, being something that is supposed to unlock my potential. And I think we can use Web3 to add some layers to these AI products that are being developed to both make them more, increase the sovereignty of like control I have over my own identity in the world, especially my digital identity. Like, I need to have sovereignty of that. If that's where I'm spending all of my time, I would probably want to actually be able to own my own identity, especially if there's an AI representing me, and really own it, not just like, oh, you own it, but it's, actually controlled by Google, right? And then also align that model with, bringing forth my potential. And maybe there's more that I can define and what that even means. But I know that isn't going to be the case if the model is trying to sell me stuff, right? If it's advertising to me, stuff like that, as its only business model. Not, their advertising can exist, but if that's the only business model, there's going to be misalignment. Just as an example.
Yeah, man, there's so much there. So much there. So with, let's see, which way do I want to go with this? I mean, the AI, deepening that conversation, and even what you talked about, digital avatar, like AI digital avatar and identity, which I saw from one of your video clips, like that you made one for yourself that was like a complete AI replication of yourself doing an advertisement, type thing.
Yeah.
And then this has been a thread in our conversation already, which is about capitalism driving AI. And that I got fed up, or it got fed up to me through YouTube algo just the other day, but it was like a 10-month-old, what is it? Tom Bellew's show. What does he do?
Impact theory.
Yeah. And it was with, and this is where I want to keep on that theory, but we can come back to AI and business, and then which will probably lead there too, but then maybe transhumanism, and then also into your projects. So if capitalism is the driving force behind AI, net negative, net positive. On the Tom Bellew, he was talking to Salim Ismail and Peter Diamandis, who's like a doctor, and they seemed giddy about creating products to basically use AI to suck people into that product. Like they were like actively giddy about these products that are gonna like fake, or AI entities that are just gonna keep people sucked into whatever product that these guys are making. They couldn't almost help how excited they were about that. And I wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, well, I without having the full context of the conversation,
That
I
was my
won't pass.
perception.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's probably totally correct. I just don't want to pass too much judgment without having seen the full context.
Yes.
I'm aware of Peter, and he talks about a lot of like futurism stuff, and he's done a lot of work with his X Prize Foundation and such to incentivize like building new and innovative things. So I think that's pretty cool. I definitely can see where he would be overly excited about some of that stuff, and I definitely would have pause on being like super excited about using AI to get people like into your products. I mean, I think there's marketing, right? Like if I have a well, I'll say this, I'll step back. So if I have something that's actually valuable for people and I can use AI to provide more of it, make sure more people know about that and use that, I think that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, if we're talking about kind of the way that the system of modern tech has taken that idea of like provide value to people, and it becomes a little bit co-opted by again like the egregore, to so to speak, or memon maybe would even be a better way to put it. Like it becomes co-opted. That mechanism becomes co-opted by a spirit of like, well, we just get so hyper focused on like acquiring users, and even to use that language is like kind of dehumanizing, right? And so it's really easy to get into a state where you're dehumanizing people when you're building technology, not because everyone building tech is evil, but just because like you're behind a screen, you're abstracted away sometimes from the humans, and so sometimes it's hard to see really like how things are playing out on the other end. And so yeah, I would be really cautious about some of the ways that and this is already happening, like some of the ways that AI is going to be used to, again, just like get you more addicted to a product. Because it's now going to be hyper personalized. It's going to know what you want. It's going to play on all the knowledge that we have of psychological triggers. Like we already had the best psychologists in the world develop the advertising industry, and now we've taken that a step further, and now we're using technology and psychology to kind of play on the triggers of the human mind and body. Like we're playing with these kind of animal sides of ourselves to get people to do stuff. And that's a really intense power that you should be thoughtful with. And you should make sure that you're not just being driven by ego. And that's kind of where, coming back to my own faith, like there's something about Christianity that kind of you have to check yourself if you really take it seriously, and which is one of the things I love about it. Going into and speaking to like really following the way of Christ, not to any one particular denomination or manifestation of it. And although there are great ones, like if you really follow the spirit of Christ in your life, like you're going to have to check your ego at some point. And I think there's a lot of people in tech that need an ego check. A lot of people who, and just to like, this may be politically incorrect to say, but there's a lot of people in tech who like weren't the best looking people, they didn't have the most power in their formative years growing up. And then because of their skill set in tech and entrepreneurship, they gain this power. And a lot of them, and that's not to disparage anyone in particular, a lot of beautiful people in tech, but there is kind of this sense of like insecurity that's coming through when a lot of these people get power, and they become very driven by that insecurity. And if you don't have a greater faith, or you don't have anything greater that you're standing on, that can be a really dangerous thing. And you can do things like, use AI, weaponize AI against your user, which is against people, to make them do stuff that aren't in their best interests. And I would just be wary of that.
Do you think that are you speaking in terms when you say AI as it exists now versus something like artificial general intelligence?
Both. I mean, I think there's like the tools that are being used now, even if they're not that, like, if I can use AI to write personalized marketing copy based on like a ton of data, personal data about you, and I can send you an email that I know you're going to open because I've hit these triggers and stuff. And I can now with AI, I can do that 100,000 times. That's possible today, and that's not AGI, but it's still it's I don't even know, it's some kind of machine learning or data science and an algorithm that's building that. Whether or not it's like full on AI, that's another conversation. But just to kind of wrap everything under this AI term for the sake of simplicity, there's stuff that's happening today that's, again, not a bad thing if you're like genuinely building something that's helping people, but can go wrong if you kind of lose sight of who you are in that, as well as at the company level, like a brand loses sight of who it is, like a brand loses its soul. That happens a lot too. Or there's just like a lot of soulless brands. And so there's that. And then there's like, well, this is the dumbest that it's ever going to be. So if you think about 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, like we're already accelerating so fast that it's hard to predict where we're going to be in 3 years. I kind of like 3 years is kind of my time horizon right now, where I'm like, with the work we're doing with Ascendance, I'm like, I want to help you get in position in the next 3 years to do your life's work and be able to leverage technology to do it, whether that's at the individual or the company level. And all levels of the stack, there's different ways to approach it. But now's the time to figure out how to use this technology to kind of bring forth your potential, because like 3 years from now, I don't know where we're going to be. I don't know what society is going to look like. And that may not be as extreme as it sounds. It may be less exciting when we get there. But it also might be very extreme. We don't really know, because a lot of things could break if we reach kind of that. If we reach a system that really breaks a lot of things fast, it's hard to predict what's going to happen. So,
I remember, what was it? Google or Facebook that had the slogan of like "move fast and break things" or something like that. That was part of the young angsty. We're going to change the world, the institutions and stuff. And it seems like everyone's kind of like, maybe we should take the opposite approach, but at the same time, everyone's scared of getting behind. So it's like push, 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 and it's really, I don't know, scary. Scary may not be the right. It's just there is so much unknown. It's not like in a weird way that social media, and search wasn't. It's just like a hyper advancement of the newspaper. This just doesn't feel like that.
yeah.
It's like, oh, I can see how this maps onto this. How this does it feels like something else, I guess. And so you kind of gave your personal 3-year time horizon for something like the what's next, or that's about as far out as I think this. From the best that I can gather, I can kind of see the path or something. But yeah, I don't remember who was on Rogan the other day that is big into this, and someone had predicted like 2029 for AGI, a long time ago, and that someone else is saying 28 and all this kind of stuff. But the I was like, should I say this? Should I say this? So I've been GBT 3.5 or 3. That's been public use for 2 years. I don't know at the time.
I think around there, yeah.
So I messed around with it, but it was like all I could do was, in my mind of framing it, was to treat it like Google. That's like about all my brain could like muster.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's embarrassing, but that's about, I messed around with then. So I'm just going to tell you my engagement with AI over the last 2 years, or year and a half. So then I did this cover band a year ago, and I figured out, okay, I'm going to try to just did a live recording, did some videos. I'm going to put it online, and I'm going to do a Spotify, because I hadn't done music for like 7 years. And I was like, okay, I just want to play with all of this again. So I had it write me a bio for my cover band. I had GBT write the bio. So if you go to Spotify and you look up Speakeasy Rock Band, and the bio was written by my prompts. So that was like my first like foray. So really just this week, I started trying to get help on doing chapter markers for all of my, so I started playing with a plugin for the first time just this week to try to get chapter markers built in. And then I was like wanting to mess around with the descriptions of my videos. And I have about 20 podcasts now. And so I can take like the descriptions that I've written, say, and I started even just today, before this conversation, I started messing around with the descriptions, and I can say, make this really favorable to the YouTube algorithm. Because I was listening, maybe it was you. I don't remember what's like. I was just getting the ideas. And then so for the description for your bio for this show, like I said, I took your Twitter profile, your ascendance like vision statement, and your YouTube channel description, threw it into ChatGPT, and then I said, take I run this podcast on YouTube, and here were 2 other descriptors. Use this tone to create, and that's what happened. And I tweaked just a few little things. And because I was looking, I don't have any connection to this person. We never had a conversation. I don't know who he likes. We didn't connect because of Jordan Peterson. Like, it was like, so anyways, that's a real life example of me like trying to like wade through, is this appropriate? And like, I mean, and here we are having this whole conversation. So I don't know how that hits you, what you think about that.
Well, I mean, I think it's a really cool and practical use of generative AI, and there's so many ways that it can be useful. But like, to your point, you have to. I think we all had that moment where it was like, oh, this is a better Google for information. But then you start to wrap your mind around the ways that the other ways that it could unlock something, and
like with Jordan Hall, which is why you commented on my video.
Exactly. Yeah, that is a great example. The idea of like creating the persona of saints and church fathers and having them debate each other in GPT is super cool. And also not just cool, but useful. Like, so that was why I commented, because I've been thinking about that problem a little bit too. I'm working on one early stage project that's actually focused on helping churches because like we have all this static content, like whether it's the 2 millennia of written works or like every church's library of sermons and books and all of this stuff. So we have all this written content. So now it's like, well, how do you either add a dimension to that content or do something new or interesting with it? And even like for me, as I was coming back into the church, and now I am active in a church again, and just kind of coming back to the world of Christian from my travels in my 20s. I just like wanted to learn, and I grew up in the church, and so it's weird like coming into it from a different angle, which I think part of it is like making your faith your own. That's a component, but not having a faith that is given to you. So when you make it your own, it's like you want to learn, like you're hungry for knowledge, you're hungry for growing deeper when it's really personal. And so I've been trying to read more. I've read a lot of stuff and I've encountered a lot of stuff, but I've been trying to read more of like the church fathers and different theologians and philosophers and such, because that was an area that I didn't encounter as much. I read and encountered a lot of modern people when I was younger, because that was kind of what was presented to me. But there's so much, even with like the resurgence of Orthodox, there's so much there that most people just aren't even aware of, especially Christians. They're not even aware of, unless you're in Orthodox church, maybe. But so the idea of using AI to help people experience and like interact with some of those perspectives is super helpful, because we have all this wealth of knowledge. And sometimes I think we forget, especially in kind of the Protestant evangelical spaces. Not saying that those are inherently bad either, but I think those spaces tend to be cut off sometimes from the history and the lineage of the church, because they broke away. Their history was breaking away from what at the time was tyrannical stuff happening in the church that they saw and spoke out against. So no wonder they broke away from it. But anyways, coming back to, well, now how do you reconnect to it? I think there's a lot of ways to use AI to kind of bring some of that to life in a way where, like, most people probably aren't going to read City of God by Augustine and spend 400 pages of text that was written in 1500 years ago, whenever it was. I should probably know that, but they might have a debate between Augustine and Origen, with like AI personas that are pulling from the text, not just making stuff up, that are like actually grounded in the text and the perspectives. And now it's like, whoa, that just came to life. And now I can explore these theological issues that I've been struggling with, but also know that these are human perspectives that are great perspectives, but come back to the scripture and the word too, as kind of like that final source of truth. So
it's a strange time. I mean, if you've only probably listened to, well, if you listened to both my conversations with Jordan, you did listen to both of them. Is that what you said? So, I obviously I still kind of operate in the Protestant world, but I've always operated in a really liminal space within that, with a lot of appreciation for history, a lot of appreciation for theology and from my family, but even in church that I worked at. And then from me coming from a charismatic and a Baptist background, like it's,
same here.
yeah. So it's like a very broad experience. And I was a pastor, like a worship pastor for 10 years. And, you talking about helping churches with your project is really interesting, but also the pattern that I recognize with tech people very interested in tech being very interested in orthodoxy, I think for a lot of different reasons, but I think that there is maybe something to do with, like, so much of modern church is screen based.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to go to church and look at more damn screens. I want to go and see a priest and weird stuff. Like, this just feels like work. I feel like I go to work, and then this feels like the business, because a lot of it's based off like a corporate business model too. So
like corporate church.
Yes.
Model. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that is, we can talk about theology, and then some people are like, I've heard people make critiques of people moving to orthodoxy just because of the aesthetics, but I'm like, maybe like, that's okay too. Like, that we all start at different places, and that may be a legitimate one, because you're like, just something about the screen. So I think that's really interesting. And I was just having this thought while you were talking about kind of furthering this idea that I stumbled onto listening to Jordan Hall was talking to this. He was talking to a guy named Brendan Graham Dempsey, who has this whole thing about meta religion. And then he's talking to people in like my internet community about meta Christianity. And he and Jordan were kind of going at it a little bit. And
what is the concept, if you don't mind me asking in 15 seconds? What is the meta Christianity concept, if that's even possible to explain it?
So, Brendan actually quoted my tweet in a conversation with this Paul Vanderklay guy that is our little patron saint around here on the YouTube space. But it's something like being able to take all the perspectives of the Christian faith, and not just the perspectives, but also the history of, well, through modernism, medieval times, modernism, postmodernism, those frameworks for those civilizational frameworks, and being able to take all of them and use them and place them in like a hierarchy of meaning and value for your or the stack. Where do those things stack of importance? They are all built on each other, and sometimes the other piece of that is that he's trying to communicate to this kind of more or less quasi-Christian space are some of the big arguments, or I don't know if argument's the right word, but the critiques of historical science on the Bible. Like we don't, it says Paul wrote this, but it probably wasn't Paul, and Moses didn't really write all of Genesis, and that Genesis is made up of 4 original sources, and there you can just go on and on. There's what is the historical Jesus? What do we really think the historical Jesus? And it's making Christianity. So that's not the meta part. That's so like, can I take the modern framework and then the postmodern framework, which is something like, well, these all have, or well, all of these are actually the same because it's all relative. And so all of these things are the same. So in postmodernism, a lot of things just collapsed because we thought that if it meant that these things are the same, then that means that they're all relative and there's no meaning. And I think the meta-modern thing is to say, actually, so maybe on some aspect you can have like a egalitarian look at religions or something, but you can also say, well, this one has had a way bigger impact on me. And when I go look at biblical scripture, it actually creates real meaning in my life, regardless of if I want to sit in this postmodern frame that says, well, they're all saying there's a God. Well, okay. So, and being able to he talks about toggling through, because there's this whole meta idea that you're kind of looking at the whole thing. I don't know if that was.
No, that makes sense. No, I get the concepts, and I think, I'm interested to check out his Twitter conversations with Jordan. I'm sure those are interesting. I think the idea of like whatever creates, not whatever as in like it doesn't matter, but just looking at ideas that have survived and shaped the world for a reason, like the idea of Christ or the spirit of Christ. The idea would be one level and the spirit would be another, like a higher level, right?
And the historical Christ would also be a level of that.
Yeah, and it would, but also understanding that Christ, like if you really look at what Christ said, I mean, he said, greater works than these you will do. Like he's the Pentecost, the giving of the Holy Spirit. Like the point wasn't to the story of Christ as a man is important because it gives us this intersection of like, now we can identify that in ourselves, right? Yes. And we can see something. It is a revelation. I mean, literally a revelation of something about our own nature and relationship to God that we previously did not have access to, that we now have access to through that story of Christ, who is God and man. And I think the study of the history is great. Like there's nothing wrong with studying history and textual criticism and commentaries and stuff. And if you look at the Bible, it's the most studied book in the modern world. So we have no shortage of that. Like if you want to criticize the amount of study that's been put into like biblical history, you don't have much to stand on, because there may be people that disagree, but we can't deny that there has been so many people in institutions and churches and things that have literally dedicated themselves to the study of these things from a historical perspective, from an esoteric perspective, from many different perspectives. So the fact that it is so well studied and so well documented, that it's lived on through so many different individuals and institutions, and really it's shaped the modern Western world and the modern world to an extent. The ideas of Christ, whether or not the individuals, the churches, the institutions were a perfect reflection of Christ isn't the point. I think it is actually important to look at that because like that's a pattern that's reflected in the Bible as well, from the Old Testament to the New. Like where there's been a lot of imperfect attempts to carry on the way of Christ, that some have gone very astray. But the fact that his spirit is still continued says something. And if you're not Christian or spiritual, when you understand the concept of like his spirit is continuing, just look at the idea level first. Like the idea has lived on in people, because people don't have ideas. Ideas have people, right? Mm-hmm. And so that idea has continued to live in all of these people for some reason, right? And that can kind of point you to what the spiritual aspect of it is, even if you can't see that. You can't see that yet. Come in from the level of like, well, this idea lives in people, and then you can maybe start to make the mental leap to, well, what does it look like for the Spirit of Christ to live in these people, right?
Well, it was awesome to just get on your YouTube page and then like, okay, this guy made a comment. Okay, so he's pointing in on like the theological point that Jordan's talking about, and I'm reading this cool thing, and your content's just like really sharp and interesting, and then there's this one line, and you said the name of Jesus, and I was like, well, damn, that we can we can start. There's something there, and identifying that spirit, and it's, I mean, it's cool to get to hear you kind of just unpack some of that on a really from a very personal place. And, and that is to get to see deeper into that on where your work and your projects are, what they're grounded in, or you're wanting to be more grounded in and built off of. And I think that is encouraging. And so, I mean, we'll just talk about, then let's go ahead and move into your projects. It's interesting. You said one about church. I've heard you say stuff about healthcare too. Like, what do you see? Well, yeah. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. A good way to phrase it. So my studio Ascendance were branded as a growth and innovation studio, because that's what we do. We help brands and leaders grow and innovate. And we primarily are focused on AI right now, although we do some work with like media as well. A lot of intersection of AI and media, emerging media, and a little bit of work in Web3. And I would expect as we grow, those components will become bigger. But AI is kind of the center point right now, as you can imagine with any early stage business, you have to focus on something. And that seems to be the thing that it seems to be the most important lever that that I understood and could speak to and help people with. And two, it kind of gives, I'm someone who gets bored easily and likes to work on a lot of different stuff. It's kind of a window into almost anything, because you can just take AI X healthcare, AI X marketing, media, whatever it is. And so I can just come in and be the person who, and along with my team and collaborators, we can come in and we can just look at what you're doing, and we can help you add a dimension to it, or we can help you evolve it, or we can help you, I work with some businesses that are service-based, and we're turning their services into products now, which is like, okay, now that has the potential to unlock a whole nother level of abundance for me if I couldn't scale my business as a services business, because it's just taking more of my time, or I have to hire people. And now I have a new way to grow. Now it's like, well, what can I do with all of that? So there's just a lot of opportunities right now that we are helping people, helping brands and leaders to tap into, and specifically around AI. And so I consult with brands. I have some partnerships with some really cool companies where we go in. I've won one agency out of Minneapolis that I partner with, and we are working with a few Fortune 500 clients right now, and one in particular, and a couple others that are developing and coming in and helping them kind of reimagine how they build brands, and how they do consumer insights and a few different things, and kind of the brand, media, marketing, and strategy side of things, where we're helping them shape their thinking in new ways and actually hopefully humanize their data, like take large data sets where it's just like numbers, and we turn them into bots and interfaces where you can have a more human experience with that data, which we're seeing, can shape how those employees are thinking. And so that would be an example of like a type of project that Ascendance takes on or is involved with, where like we want to use these tools to help shape thought in new ways. We want to unlock, crazy growth and abundance for people. But we always come back to vision too. It's, it's not just growth for growth's sake. It's like, what's your vision, or what is really the spirit of your brand, and where are you trying to go, and how can we unlock more of that? Because if you had a lever that could pour on an abundance of financial resources, what would you do with that, right? It's not just about, to your point earlier, like using AI to get people addicted to your stuff. It's like, how do we grow meaningful things, right? So that maybe is too much information. To make it really simple, we do AI strategy, we build applications, so we do development, and we do like some innovation consulting. And then I have either equity stakes in, or am internally developing a few different products as well. So kind of a venture component that's emerging.
This, I think in this little corner of the internet that I found myself dropping into a community, and there's a lot of like this weird digital YouTube community, and there's a lot of poking fun at, well, there's a lot of I don't know if the word is, but the right word, how to say ironic, but ironic use of branding, but also very intentional use of branding, because of somebody that you might not you well you would kind of represent the man. And like, and I feel like I've always like I've bumped up against this, because there's a part of me that loves building pretty things or something, like yet not at the expense of the person. And that's a really hard, like you're talking about it, like you're actively talking about it, but it's very hard at the end to not sacrifice the person for the sake of growth. I being at a church, so this was a long time ago, or mid 2010 or mid aughts, putting like some Sunday morning recordings onto the internet on our website. Hey, this was Sunday. Sounded terrible. I mean, objectively terrible. And some days it would sound objectively better, but objectively terrible better. And other day it was objectively worse, terrible. So a guy came in from a really big church that we had fill in on a weekend. And he's like, you got to get that off the internet. I listened to your sermon in the music. He's like, you got to get it off. Okay. And I mean, I agreed it wasn't great. We're using the people that we had to do the best that we could. When I was on the road, I was out recording albums with my friends, and I was traveling and doing large scale, like conferencing and events and stuff. And so I had this value for quality of certain kind, objective quality, measurement, pitch, tone, rhythm, melody, all these things. So then it was just this tension to be like, Well, if we want to grow the organization, we have to increase our quality. And that means that hypothetically you would get rid of not quality music or musicians or something like that. And I mean, you see this all over the place. You see this in every mega church. You know, it was different though because you started with these people and you're trying to grow, and it's like, well, for you don't make the cut now. Something. So what I'm trying to aim at, and as we're kind of is when in the language of growth statistics, that, and you were talking about, we have to come back to the vision of the heart, maybe of the vision, that is actually like, to do that is very uncomfortable. Actually, if you're going to practice it, it might actually come at the cost of a different growth metric. And if we stay in the growth metrics that we've been in, well, it's going to sacrifice. There's going to be a lot of things sacrificed for it. And I want to encourage you along your journey, man, to to dig deeper and not deeper, to keep digging into that impulse that you're wrestling with, because I mean, the future, I guess, is the future human? Because I think that's, I don't know. I think that's the question. I think you said humans create the vision, tech helps you be more effective. And we have to keep coming back to that.
Well, I think that's the ideal. Ideally, that's what happens, but that's not always what happens, right? Like, I think the comment I made was something around corporations are entities that humans created to serve us and do things.
Yeah, you said that earlier.
Improve our lives and the world around us, to build things, to organize resources. But that vision, that gift of creation, which we as humans made in the image of God have that gift of creation, to source from something and bring it forth into the world, which can be, again, you can be sourcing from good or bad things too, but we have that gift, and we're given free will of how we want to use that. That's something that we need to really come back to in these coming years as AI starts to become something that takes over a lot of stuff that we used to do. I think it can be a very good thing if we use it as an opportunity to kind of reclaim our role as creators and reclaim our innate humanity, really, because we've sacrificed it in a lot of ways for the sake of the profit, for the sake of efficiency, for the sake of for fear, for security, right? And we have to kind of take that power back. And to your point, like, really, the concept that comes to mind is that I've talked about before is heart-centered technology, and you can apply that to business. You can apply that to leading your church in a heart-centered way. But it's the concept is ubiquitous, but it's important because it's speaking to, like, really centering on what's important first, and then operating from there, right? Centering on love, centering on your heart. If you're a man of faith or a woman of faith, centering on your faith and standing on that, and then operating from that place, instead of that's over here and my work is over here, and like hopefully they connect sometimes, or like hopefully I get to have a nice feel good, because that's what I've seen with people I've met that that aren't really operating from a heart-centered manner. I've spent time, especially in my earlier years, like contributing to projects that I thought were in people's companies and stuff, and that I thought were like really great and really going in the right direction. And then as I get to know these people, and they're all on their own journey. So as am I. But there's been certain people I've met in my life who are come from that corporate world, who are like they're seeking that emotional high because they don't get it, and so they can kind of have this appearance of like coming from a heart-centered place, but it's really more like the feel-good emotions as a drug place. And like you have to get past that and to really be heart-centered, and that means like sitting with your light and your shadow, to use more of the new agey language, but the understanding like who you are as a fully integrated person, and sitting with like, yeah, I have to make money to eat and feed my family, and that's important. And there's things that I want and things that I desire to be in this world, and that's real. And there's values that I hold, and there's a faith that I have, and I want to operate like within the context of all these things in what I create, and that's not easy to sit with sometimes, because it's like, well, to use the church example, like you want to build a church and grow something great and impact more people and stuff. And so it's like, then when you're sitting with it, are you sacrificing your desire for growth? Are you sacrificing the spirit of what you're doing for the desire for growth? I think it really comes down to properly ordering your desires. And that's where it's like, if you seek ye first the kingdom, and all these things will be added to you. Maybe not in the way that you foresaw it. But if you really have properly ordered desires, like you're, again, if you're of the faith, like you're seeking the kingdom first, and you're really sitting with that, and then looking at the ways that you're not doing that, because there are ways that we're all not doing that. So if you're willing to actually sit with that and be like, and feel the emotions and be like, the way that I was operating these past couple months, I'm disgusted by that, right? Or like, I don't like this thing that I'm seeing here. And then you integrate that and you work through that. That's where that like centeredness can really start to come through.
What that's making me think of is like I don't know, this is a hypothetical thought. You hire this AI consultant, Ascendance.1, and he comes in and he's looking at your program and your everything and evaluating, and instead of saying, here's the next AI tool, he says something like, have you thought about trying to get recentered as a person? Like,
yeah, real.
No, I came in here, I hired you to tell me what the problem is so that we can get on the game, like, but that, to me, that is a more human approach. That is an absolutely more human approach. Like, maybe before, but who do we give authority to that in our lives other than maybe a therapist and maybe your church or the Bible or something like that's, but I think, well, honestly, I think that's part of what drove part of Jordan Peterson to the top, was because he said that to people.
Yeah.
But we find it hard to believe that we might need that. I just think that's really interesting. That if part of business was, or, we're going to consult her because he can help us do this, and that's going to make us do this or something. That there are other metrics at play. So we're coming up on time. I wanted to kind of end on kind of this. I don't know if this is fun, but just a thought. Like, this just happened. It was in the news this week. The Catholic Church just released an AI priest. Did you see that?
I actually haven't seen that. I'm surprised I didn't. What was it?
Oh, man. I don't have the link pulled up. Maybe I should have. There are a lot of people that are like, this is, the worst thing that could have ever happened. I don't, it's not like a priest per se, but like maybe like a help hotline type, and there's a digital avatar.
Oh, I see I just pulled it up. I see the avatar. That's kind of creepy.
Okay, so yeah, let's
make a better avatar than that. The background's cool. They got the background down. But,
What are your thoughts?
I don't know enough about it to totally give again to judge without full information, but it's interesting. I mean, I don't think an AI priest is the right vehicle. Like I think the direction is not bad, but they're maybe putting it in the wrong vehicle. Why does the AI have to be a replica of a human? Like why does it in that kind of avatarish way is kind of my thing is like I think you're creating something new, and that's kind of like what we're dancing around. Like we want to make it a human interaction. We're interacting with our technology in a human way, but there's already kind of a brand around what a priest is. So why not be like a guardian? Why not be like an AI archangel? Like that was just off the top, so don't quote me on that. But I think there's maybe more creative ways that we could kind of frame how we start to bring AI into the fold in meaningful ways. I could see like this being kind of an extension of the Saint GPT, the concept that you talked about with Jordan, where you can kind of simulate discussions and stuff. But yeah, I mean, you got to be really careful with how the bots are trained and what data they're pulling from and stuff too. It looks like there was some controversy around this Catholic AI's answers. Again, I don't without reading all of it.
Of course,
what it was. Yeah, and it might just be people talking. I don't know, but
man. Well, Will Preble, thank you for coming and sharing time with me today, for giving me insights into your world and your expertise. It's very meaningful. I hope that this is enlightening and informative and encouraging to people that are listening. And I look forward to bumping into you on Twitter and around the internet some. And if it makes sense again, maybe we'll talk again in the future. But man, do you have any closing thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I really nothing crazy. I appreciate the space you're creating. It feels like a very I mean, the thinking out loud thing is real. It seems like very open, but also intentional. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. And I'm picking up I kind of started and stopped the whole podcasting thing a year and a half ago when I was not in a place to really commit to it. But I think I'm gonna get back into it soon. So maybe I'll have to have you jump on the Ascendance podcast sometime when that gets going. But yeah, I mean, I think we need more spaces for conversations like this. So just want to honor and appreciate the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm going to hit this little video and hang on backstage. We'll close it out. Okay.
Cool.
All right, man. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.